And we have a request from Bill E. that speakers need to wear a tie.
My name's Bob, alcoholic. I want to tell you, Bill. Dorothy let me come to this meeting just like this. I was absolutely amazed.
That's the reason she didn't come with you.
That's right. That's right. That makes me nervous standing up there. I don't know. I was barbecuing this afternoon, and I don't do a lot of projecting. But I was sitting out there watching the fire go and everything, and I thought, how am I gonna keep Dorothy from dressing me, real, immaculately? My black shoes haven't been polished for 2 or 3 days and stuff like that, and I'm a little nervous, and so if my voice is shaky, it'll settle down a little bit. But anyway, I was sitting out there thinking about that, and she didn't come out and tell me to go up and polish my shoes or anything, and I started to get a little concerned. And after we had dinner and everything, she said, well, you can wear these pants and this shirt. I've laid them out for you. So I go into the bedroom, and here these clothes are. And I said, all right, Dorothy. She's finally starting to get well. I guess I'm supposed to tell you what it was like and what happened and what it's like now. So I will start. I was born in Colorado. My parents moved to Santa Maria when I was 2 years old. And I started my formal education right here in this room. Started kindergarten in this building. And I attended several schools around Santa Maria. Fairlawn. I'm a graduate of Fairlawn. I was sitting there trying to think of some things I could say, because we have a guy that's sitting over here that used to be a visitor and now is part of our group. He's threatened to walk out at the most appropriate time, so I'm going to do all of this preliminary stuff, so anytime you feel like leaving, Jim, just don't let it bother you, okay? I went to school in Santa Maria, and I graduated from Santa Maria High School, and then I did a very short time in the Army, came back and attended Hancock College for a while, and went to a business college down in Los Angeles. As far as drinking is concerned, I did the normal thing that you do when you're in high school, especially at the most appropriate times. Dances were always good for that, When I was in junior high school, they started junior high dances, and I hated those things. God, all the boys were on this side of the room, and all the girls were on this side of the room, and then the teachers would go down both sides trying to get this side to go over to that side, And I hated those things, and it was a little better in high school because you could find somebody that'd buy a jug or some beer or something, and then you didn't mind so much walking from this side of the room to the other side of the room. And if you went over there and said the wrong thing or got rejected, it didn't hurt quite as bad. So I kind of liked that. And but drinking, at that point, I don't think, I drank as much as I could get whenever we could get it, but it wasn't too available, and so it was no big deal. But when I went to college, I guess that was the first time that I became aware that maybe booze might be a problem. I went to this business school, and the school actually started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they let you out at 12 because a lot of the people that attended the school were veterans, and they held full-time jobs, and they went to school at the same time, and so there was nothing to do from 12 until 7 the next morning. And a couple of friends and I figured out how to fill that time in. Right out the back door of where we stayed and across the street was a beer bar. And so we spent a lot of studying time in that beer bar. And I was there for, I don't remember how long, but I always remember the ends of things. You know that? even today, when I have a dream, a dream about being drunk or something, I never remember going in and sitting down at the bar and having a drink. It always comes up that I'm coming to at the bar again, and they're kicking me out because it's 2 o'clock and I'm drunk. That's my drunk dreams, and it's the same thing happens to me when I think about things that happened in my past. I always remember the ends of them, and I remember the end of my college days down there because I was not attending class as regularly as they would like to have had me attend class, and at the same time I had an obligation to Uncle Sam to attend weekly Army drills, and I wasn't paying a lot of attention to those either. And it got to be where the teachers were kind of upset about my attendance, and the Army was starting to get on my tail a little bit, and so I decided that the best thing for me to do would be to get married. And so I'd been going with Dorothy for some time before that, and I'd come up, she was living in Santa Barbara, and my folks were still living here in Santa Maria, so I'd come home for the weekends and that type of thing. But my attendance, like I said, my attendance in class was poor, and about the time I was trying to figure out how I was going to get out of this school thing, I got a official letter from Uncle Sam, and it said, "You are in deep trouble, baby. You have missed all of these obligations, and you're to report to your home group, and you're to tell us why we shouldn't bring you back in again." And so I quickly packed everything up, came back to Santa Maria, and I happened to know the commanding officer of the local group here, and I worked out a deal with them to work in the office there during the daytime to work off all these drills. So it was during that period of time that I decided that I connected schoolwork and that heavy grind with drinking and that kind of thing. And so I decided that was not a good idea to go back to school. So I decided that if I wasn't going to go back to school, I might as well get married. And so Dorothy and I got married, and about that time my folks moved to Salinas. So we were married in Santa Maria, and we lived in Salinas for a couple of years. And then I came back again to Santa Maria to open up a branch office of my father's business here in Santa Maria. And so I came back, and just about that time was when I joined one of the local up-and-coming young groups in Santa Maria. And I'm going to tell you it was the JCs, but I also want to tell you that they didn't have a damn thing to do with my drinking. And I enjoyed that. We did a lot of good things, and we had a lot of good times. And somewhere along in there, it became a process where they had weekly meetings. They met every Tuesday or Wednesday night, I don't even remember now. But then I found myself becoming more and more involved, and so it was the Tuesday night meeting, and then it was a committee meeting, and then it was a Tuesday night meeting, a committee meeting, and then it was another one, and on and on. And all of a sudden, I found myself almost heavily obligated to this organization, and it allowed me to get out and do my thing. I know now, and looking back, that a lot of that was just an excuse to get out and drink. But I was having a good time. I was doing good for the community and myself and family and everything. And right about now is when Dorothy developed a problem. She became very ungrateful. I was working my tail off to feed her and 4 kids. I was committing my personal time to these civic endeavors, and she just didn't appreciate any of it. I talked to her too, I really, Sometimes she really had to be talked to. Sometimes she talked to me. It was one of those things where we just didn't have the same. She just didn't understand. That was her problem. And I was perfectly happy. I was going along and I was doing all these things, and in the meantime I'd gotten an appointment to the City of Santa Maria's Planning Commission, and I was really going. I was going up in the world, and things were going good for me. And there was one little thing that kind of bothered me from time to time, and that's that I would make a mistake, and Dorothy would be particularly perturbed about my actions, and so I would promise her that I would not do that again. I'd come home 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and she'd be standing there. You know how they stand there. And I would explain to her how it was very necessary for me to do these things, that I was a good father, I was a good provider, and besides that, I was a pillar of the community. And I was sure that she didn't understand who she was talking to, or she would not be talking to me in that tone of voice. So we would go through several phases. She would either talk to me or she wouldn't talk to me. Sometimes she would pretend she was asleep, and I would pretend I was asleep, and it was really a wonderful life, That's why I guess I was a bar drinker. There wasn't, it seemed to me that when you had to put up with that kind of thing, all that ingratitude of an individual, when you were doing all of these things for your community and your family, that you should have a little bit more respect. But she didn't see it that way. So we had a difference of opinion for a long time. But every now and then I would make the mistake of promising that I would not get drunk again. And if she got particularly loud or violent, she was violent. I don't want to take her inventory. Are we taping this, Dan? But I wore a lot of dinners over my head. Here's a guy that's sacrificing himself, working 10 or 12 hours a day, to give this woman a nice place to live, and those 4 kids meals and everything. And I would come home, just a little, but I would come home to dinner, She would go through these things. She'd say, just come home, make it to dinner, So I'd make it to dinner, and I'd be sitting there, and in front of my family she would do this. The kids would be sitting there and everything. And she would become vocal, and I would become vocal, and all of a sudden I had spaghetti running down my head. And I was sitting there, and I'd say, Jesus Christ, if the mayor could just see me now. So our life in our household was not all that good, and so I found it easier to deal with people in the bars. The people in bars are easy to deal with, especially if you happen to have a couple of bucks, or a nice long tab. And so I found it a lot easier to drink outside the home than inside the home. She told me a couple of times, she said, if you just drank at home. Well, I tried that a couple of times. I knocked that off real fast. She'd say, if you just call, have you ever heard that one? Just call. Let me know where you're at. Just call. So I'd be doing something very heavy and very crucial at the time, and I would think, I have to call. So I would excuse myself and go over the phone, dial the number. She'd answer, and I'd say, Dorothy, it's me. And she'd say, you're drinking again, and you're drunk. Slam. So much for calling, Then we played a little game, too, that called, Can We Find Bob in the Bar Tonight, And that kind of went like this, you go into your favorite one of your favorite places, and you're sitting there, and the phone rings, and you go like this, you know. No, not here, you know. Bartender asking, no, Dorothy, I haven't seen him today. He'd turn around, he'd get your ass out of here. She's coming down. Out I'd go. And so I had a lot of favorite places around Santa Maria. Dave asked me to tell you about one of my most embarrassing times. I was entertaining a friend of mine at one of the local bars one night. I was sitting there, happened to be a female. And I was sitting there, we were talking, drinking, and in walks Dorothy with two of the kids. And I don't know, this, you know, these high-level discussions, she never understood, you know, how important these things were. And that was real embarrassing. She said something about go home or something like that. And I said, well, I want to introduce you to my friend, and she wasn't interested in my friend. But anyway, that was a very little embarrassing. Also, it was a little embarrassing to me also that I would do a little weird stuff that I didn't think was appropriate, and from time to time I'd have a little bit too much to drink, and I'd go home and I'd lay down being real tired. I'd have the call of nature, and I'd get up and go to the bathroom, and all of a sudden somebody's got their arm on my shoulder. Bob, please use the bathroom. You know, and those things I just didn't want to get around. And they could have, you know, she has. Anonymity was not her thing. So Dorothy kept getting sicker and sicker. And I was out on a mission of mercy one day, and a friend of mine was leaving town, and a bunch of us guys decided to give him a send-off. And so Dave and I decided that preparations had to be made. You know, if a group of guys are going to go and have lunch and give the proper send-off, somebody has to go scout the territory. So we go over there about 11 o'clock, start drinking. It was an appropriate place. We had the lunch. This guy as soon as lunch was over, this guy wanted to go, you know. Well, we just kept it up, and I don't know all what happened in that. If you want to know what happened that night, you'll have to check with Dave, because I don't remember that. The only thing I remember, and the reason I remember this particular night, was because when I came home, it was about 2:30, 2:45, normal, and drove in the driveway, and the lights in the house were on, and I said, oh, Jesus, you know, we're going to go through this one again. See, we'd been going through a period of silence for the last month or so. She had pretended like she was asleep. The lights would be all dark, and the house would be completely dark. And so when I went up to get into the house, I put the key in, and, you know, real quietly. I knew she needed her sleep. And so I opened the door, and I'd get in, and I'd close the door real softly. I'd start down the hall, and then, bam, I'd hit the floor. My suitcases were packed again. Right in the middle of the hallway. But we had been going through that kind of thing for a month or so, but this night when I came home, the lights were on, and I knew we were going to go through one of the spaghetti deals again, because it was either she was asleep or we were fighting, one of the two. So I was preparing myself, going up there, and walked in the house, staggered in or whatever, and she said, I want to talk to you. And she was very calm. She even had almost a normal voice, and she told me that she'd called Alcoholics Anonymous and that she had talked to someone down there. And this person that she was talking to described a little bit about what she was like when she drank, and she said, it sounds an awful lot like what you've been going through, you know. And she said, I think maybe you ought to check out this AA thing. And she caught me at a bad time. I wasn't feeling very well. And so I said, okay, you know, I'll check out this AA. And so the next morning when I got up, about noon, something like that, it was on a Saturday, she, right into the bedroom as soon as she heard me, and she said, now you haven't forgotten you're going to go to an AA meeting, have you? I said, no, I haven't forgotten, which I had. And then she insisted that I call somebody. You know, well, I didn't know any of those people. You know, who knows those kind of people? You know, I hadn't seen anybody in a World War II trench coat with a bottle hanging out of it for months. The last time I seen something like that was one of my favorite drinking spots, you know, and I hadn't been there for a while. And so she just kept insisting that I call somebody, and she happened to remember the name of a guy that had owned a store here in Santa Maria. And this guy I'd had coffee with almost on a daily basis for the last 3 or 4 years, and he would talk about AA from time to time, especially on Monday mornings. He would be particularly ecstatic, you know. Monday mornings are terrible for alcoholics. I never liked Monday mornings. And this guy would talk about these speakers and all of this kind of stuff, and of course I never connected it, never even connected it. In fact, when I said, okay, I'll call somebody. Now who in the hell do I call, smarty, you know? Well, you call Bert. Oh, yeah, shoot, I forgot about Bert. So finally I called Bert, and he came over, and he had this little card with 20 questions on it. So he asked me to do this test thing, and I knew it was a test. I mean, you know, I might have had a drinking problem, but I'm not stupid, you know. When I saw it, but the problem of it is it wasn't multiple choice. It was just true or false or yes or no. I don't remember what the hell it was, but I went down there and I knew it was designed to trick me, so I carefully marked the appropriate ones yes, and the appropriate ones no. Yeah, I know. You don't drink in the morning. That's one thing, you know, and you don't miss work. And, you know, I had a lot going for me, so I took the test. I proudly handed it over to him, and then he looks at it, and he kind of laughed. And I didn't know what that was all about. I didn't know that for a long time. He knew I'd lied like heck, but he looks at it, then he read the bottom of it. He said, if you've answered, you know, more than 3 of these yes, you're probably alcoholic. And I said, let me see, you know, maybe I made a mistake on a couple of... But I ended up coming to my first AA meeting that Saturday night. I sat right down at the end of that table down there where Greg is. And Bob was leading the meeting, and the place was I don't know, it wasn't, I guess it was a big meeting for that time, but there was, that whole table was full, and there were some people sitting over here and over here, and Bob, if you know Bob, he's a fun-loving guy, and you know, he just laughed through that whole meeting. He was having the greatest time. The people shared, and they were telling some terrible things, and they were laughing, and I kind of got the feeling that maybe I had the wrong ideas about alcoholics. You know, not one of those guys had World War II jackets on. There wasn't one bottle on the table, and they were having a good time. But they were sharing, and they were sharing some stuff that I hadn't thought about for a long time, especially in relationship to alcoholism being a disease. They told me that alcoholism was a disease, that if I was alcoholic and if I took a drink, then I didn't have much to say about whether I was going to drink again. I just drank. I didn't know that. I thought I liked it. I thought it was fun. Cut down on the rejections, you know. They told me it was a disease coupled with an obsession of the mind. I threw that out, you know. It wasn't wrong with anything wrong with my head. And I look good, right, Bill? Bill's description is something like sick and sorry, something like that. I thought I looked pretty good. After all, I hadn't had a drink all that day. And one of the guys at the end of the meeting, before I sat down at the end, and I saw where the door was, and I was making a beeline for that door, and somebody grabs me and said, "Bob, you know," he said, "you never have to feel this way again if you don't want to." And I thought, my God, how in the hell does he know how I feel? You know, after I'd just been impressed by all these people, because, see, they had told a little bit of my story, each one of them that went around. But I already knew how that happened. Dorothy had had all day long. She knew where this place was. And each one of them had, you know, a little card down there that they were looking at, you know. Make sure you mention this, you know. But I did feel something that in that meeting that first night was the fact that the way these people were talking and the things they were saying made me feel that there were at least several other people in the world that had felt some of the things I had felt and done some of the things I had done and were tired and sick and lonely and scared to death that somebody was going to find out who the hell they were. That was one of my biggest hang-ups. I didn't want anybody to know who in the heck I was. I knew if you knew who I was, if you knew what went on up here, you wouldn't like me. If you knew how crazy this was, you wouldn't have a thing to do with me. And so I didn't want you to know who I was. I didn't want you to know how I felt. I didn't want you to know anything about me. And I had a feeling when I left this room that night that there were other people that had felt the same way. Because, see, I tried to find people in the bars that felt that way. They didn't seem to feel that way. You know, we were either having too good a time or we were so sick that we didn't know what to do. I never connected that when I was in there. It was amazing to me for a long time that I never could find anybody in the bar that felt the same way I did. Well, I guess that the whole thing was that they probably gone in there for the same thing I had gone in there for. I'd gone in there to get well from the day before because I was not a morning drinker. I knew that if you drank in the morning, then you really had a problem. So I'd do anything. I suffered miserably until I could get down and have lunch. And I'd walk into those places just shaking and sit down, and after the second Bloody Mary, I said, "What's the big deal? What the hell was the problem?" Order another drink and go from there and start the process all over the next day. But that was my first experience with Alcoholics Anonymous, was that night. And I kept coming back to meetings, and I don't know why I kept coming back to meetings. I guess God saw to it that I made it. But I came to a lot of AA meetings, and I heard the same thing every night. Don't drink a day at a time. Read the book, get a sponsor, and you pray a lot. Well, I thought 2 out of 3 is not too bad. You know, I don't want to pray any, but so I kept coming back to meetings, and I'd been coming about 5 or 6 weeks when I determined that Alcoholics Anonymous was probably a good place for people that needed it. I was feeling so good. I hadn't had a drink for about 6 weeks, and physically I bounced back pretty good, and of course the mental obsession didn't apply to me anyway. So I was sitting down in the coffee shop this one morning, and you know who walked in. Now there's a guy that needed the program. And he sat down and we started talking, and I started telling him some of the stupid things that I was just rolling over in my mind. You know, like I say, Alcoholics Anonymous was a little stupid because they only knew that you didn't drink a day at a time, and you read this book and you did this and that. There was only about 4 or 5 things that they ever talked about in these meetings. A wide variation of interpretation, but basically that was the thing. And so I thought, well, you know, even though I haven't drank for 6 weeks, I probably quit too early anyway. After all, I was a lot younger than most of the people. That was the other thing that impressed me when I first came to my first AA meeting. They were all very old. Most of them were over 40. And so I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I found myself talking to Dave and telling him, nobody can tell you if you're alcoholic. Don't drink a day at a time. And they got this book down there that you should read. And you should go to a meeting and find out if you're alcoholic, because that's what I had done. I had come to Alcoholics Anonymous to prove to my wife, my ungrateful wife, that I was not alcoholic. Because she promised me that if I came to AA and found out that I was an alcoholic, she would get out of my life forever. That's the best deal I'd had for 10, 15 years, you know. And so Dave started coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, and we started going to meetings together, and we'd go to coffee after the meetings, and we'd take everyone's inventory, and then first thing in the morning we would have coffee again, and we'd do the inventories again because we probably left something out. And then things just got better and better, and I quit going to Alcoholics Anonymous a little bit. I went real often in the beginning. I went out every night. I did their 90 meetings and 90-day thing, and then after about a year and a half or two, I had all my stuff together, you know. And we moved again. We moved to Salinas again because I had everything together so much. My head told me to get the hell out of here. So I did. And we had 4 children, and one of our second boy was particularly a problem. And we moved to Salinas, and then we were there a couple of years, and you know, I can't even tell you where AA is in Salinas. I had business still down here in Santa Maria, so I used to come down every other week for 3 days, and so I made all my AA meetings here in Santa Maria when I'd come back. But I can't even tell you where the club was up there. That's how social I am. So we moved back to Santa Maria, and when we moved back, all hell broke loose. The second boy became 14 years old. And because we had moved him from Santa Maria up to Salinas and then moved him back again, he was going to show us. And so we experienced some problems, and I got back to Alcoholics Anonymous with a vengeance. And I came to a lot of meetings. And Dorothy started Al-Anon. Dorothy came, when I first came in onto AA, I don't know, I can't tell you how many meetings she went, but she was not impressed. And so she didn't attend very much Al-Anon. But when we started having trouble with this boy of ours, we both got back into the program. And we started. And let me tell you, it was absolutely necessary then for me to get into those steps. Absolutely. To save my sanity, which I had many years ago. But I didn't understand the insanity they were talking about at first. I thought they were meant, you know, because I had never made jail. I'd never made the nut ward. And all kinds of stuff, you know. And, it never dawned on me that one of the reasons I never made jail was because, you know, when I was growing up in Santa Maria, this was a very small town. And I'd been stopped many times. But what would happen is they would say, "Oh, Bob, now follow me, and you go right home, and you go right to bed." You know, I should have made jail so many times, but I never did. And I prided myself on that when I first came into AA. I said, you know, I'm not like those other people. I'm not of that class, you know. But I got into the Alcoholics Anonymous with a vengeance when we started having all these problems, and they just kept getting bigger and bigger. And I just, I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got into the steps in the program, and I got into the book, and I'd done some of the things that they told me I was going to do. Because up to that point, I wasn't drinking a day at a time. But I didn't realize how my head was going. I didn't realize what was happening up here. And I found out the program really worked. The steps really did. They will. The promises start coming true when I started doing the steps. Up until that point, I was just dry. I wasn't getting in any trouble, and, you know, what's her name was staying off my tail, which was good enough for right then. But then when the things really started getting down to the nitty-gritty, then I found it absolutely necessary to find out what the hell they were talking about when they were talking about insanity. That thing that makes me do those things over and over and over again. The turnout, Zippo, and I turn right around and do them again. And I still have that ability today from time to time. It doesn't bother me as much as it used to, but now I know what it's about. And I know the way I drank the difference of it was is it wasn't how much I drank or where I drank or who I drank with. It was a fact that it answered the question that I'd asked myself for a long time, that when I started, I couldn't quit. I had no control. Absolutely none. Some guy asked me one night, he says, when you start drinking, can you tell where you're going to finish? No, absolutely no. Can you say what you're going to do between the time you start and the time you stop? No, I absolutely had no idea. All over this valley, all over places, and, you know, but it never made any sense to me. Because I thought, in my mind, an alcoholic was a certain type of person. And I didn't know that it didn't have anything to do with that. It had to do with the loss of control. It had to do that when I started, I couldn't quit. Absolutely couldn't. And my life was getting more miserable and more miserable, and I kept telling myself it wasn't. I kept telling myself that because of who I was and what I was doing and everything else, I was immune. And I wasn't. I know today that it saved my tail coming into AA. I'd make a lot of jokes about Al-Anon. I'm not going to tell any Al-Anon jokes tonight. But I love Al-Anon too, because it's kept our family together. It's brought our family together. I think the last 11 years that we've been in Santa Maria, back to Santa Maria, and both of us been in the program, her and Al-Anon and me back in AA. Because it's the process that they tell us in the book. We come in here and we find out how to live our lives a day at a time without a drink. And then we try to carry the same message to other people that may be having the same problem. And somehow that works. Somehow that keeps me out of myself enough, helping others so that I can live a life with some serenity and with some reason, some purpose. I didn't realize it, but just before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, my life had no purpose at all. I guess that's why I had contemplated suicide from time to time. But it's absolutely amazing to me. Anyhow, we got here, and I started going through the steps, and I found them pretty tough. I found them to be hard. They kept telling me the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is a very simple program, and I thought they were saying easy. And I didn't find it easy. But it is. It's really very true. I was talking to somebody the other night out here after a meeting. The more complicated there is a problem, the more complicated it is, the harder a solution you can find. Look for a simple answer. It never dawned on me that a cure for my alcoholism would be not to drink. The first time I ever heard that was in these rooms. Dorothy told me constantly, why don't you drink like old Joe? You know, he has a good time, he drinks, but he doesn't get drunk. And I tried to explain to Dorothy that when I started drinking, I'm sorry, I lose count. After all, who wants to count anyway? But I just flat lose track. So if you tell me to have 3 drinks, I go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, you know. And the reason I do that is because I can count, I can count to 3, but I forget where I'm at, so I have to start over again. But Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon both have been just fantastic to both Dorothy and I. And I got to tell you, that 14-year-old boy called us the other day, and he's some 36 days sober. You know, that makes it worth it. And there's been so many things that have been worth it to me in my life. I kind of make light of my drinking, I kind of make light of the program and so forth, but that's the way I am. My program's very simple. It's serious because it means my life. But I didn't come into Alcoholics Anonymous to die. I came in to live. So I like joking and having fun. The steps are serious. They must be taken. I found it a little more convenient to take them in order. They numbered those for people like Jim over here. But you know, just before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I knew deep down somewhere, even though drinking was not my problem, I knew that I would never see my daughter married, that I wouldn't live long enough to have grandchildren. I knew that something would happen that would prevent me from living a full life. And then I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and followed a few simple things, and I didn't work the steps right. I didn't do the things they told me to do. I didn't believe in God. I didn't like the word God. I knew you were trying to con me when you replaced it with higher power. Like I said, I might be alcoholic. You know, I got that far. I got to where I was even an alcoholic. But some of these things didn't apply to me. I was going to be the first guy to get 30 years on this program without God. I held out for about 4 or 5. But that's the most precious thing in my life today, is the God that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has given me. I wouldn't read the book when I first came. In fact, I didn't even buy a book. You know, the book in our house came from Dorothy. She finally broke down and spent $5 and got a book. But it says in there, to me, it says in there, that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is designed for a guy like me that doesn't believe, can't be convinced. It's designed for a guy that's too good, too classy, you know, whatever, to be able to humble himself enough to look for a higher power, to look for a God, to look for that thing that will quiet our hearts and to make us feel at home. And so not only the 12 steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, as promised in the book, have come true for me, but all of those things that I knew were not ever going to happen to me have happened to me. I got to walk my daughter down the aisle. She's married to a jackass, but that's all right. God himself wouldn't be good enough for her. But I have a grandson now. I got to see that happening. You know, the best things in my life today are what I hated to hear in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, we had an old guy, Billy, attended a lot of meetings, and this guy had the audacity to say, you know, the best lines in life are watching the flowers. You could tell, you just look at Bill, you can tell why he likes flowers. But they are for me today, too. You know, I'm sitting in my backyard today, you know, nobody back there. Just me and my dog. My dog likes me, too. And those are the good times for me today. You know, I can be by myself today. I can be with Bob, nobody else around, and I can be comfortable. When I was drinking, to be comfortable, I had to be where the action was. I had to be where the high-level decisions were made. I had to be doing things. I had to be part of. I could not be by myself. Drove me nuts. And I didn't know why. Today I can be by myself. It feels good. It feels good to be just comfortable and be at peace with the world. And so I don't need the things that I needed before. The priorities that I had coming into Alcoholics Anonymous were unreal. I knew that if I could maintain some semblance of sobriety, and if I got along, I didn't drink, they promised me that good things would happen to me. And I could see the shiny Cadillac sitting in front of the mansion. And all the little people coming to visit me. It didn't turn out that way. You know, it's a funny thing. I had such a problem with God, like I told you before. And I wasn't really very anxious to resolve that, because they told me when I first came in that you can pick anything you want to be your higher power. And so that kept me coming back to meetings, and I did. I picked some groups, and I picked some people and stuff like that, and it worked for me. And then as I have come along through the program, and as I've stuck around AA, and as I've become in a closer conscious contact with the God as I understand him today, and just absolutely overwhelms me to think that I can think like that now. But I realize that all of those years, probably even drinking, my very most favorite thing today is the footsteps in the sand, where this fellow is talking about how there are two sets of footsteps in the sand when he and God are walking together, and some of the worst times in his life there was only one set of footprints, and God tells him that that's when God was carrying this individual. And you know, I look back at that and I can see that, you know, there's one set of footprints for a long part of my life. But the thing that I'd like to say is that it didn't make any difference. God's so patient. He was so patient with me that he didn't care. I was willing to try the program, and I was willing to do the things that I was told to do. Even though I didn't do them the way I should have from time to time, he knew that I was trying the very best I could at that time, working with whatever I had to work with. And he went ahead and he just sat back and patiently waited until I found where I was supposed to be. So all of these things that have happened in my life are so wonderful. And I could have missed the whole deal. Because I used to tell Dorothy, she would get particularly loud and obnoxious, and I would say, you know, I'm probably just an alcoholic. And she said, oh no, you know, my God, you're only 25 years old, you can't be alcoholic. I said, you're right, let's have another drink. But the thing about it was the disease of alcoholism in our family, like so many other families, was a family illness. And to watch the kids grow up and do their thing and live life and everything is just absolutely amazing to me, considering all the craziness that was going on not too many years ago. All of this stuff, and actually I was spared so many things, and I love working with alcoholics, and I love coming to a lot of meetings, and I love helping someone that might have a problem, because it does in fact get me out of me. So worst place for Bob is in Bob, and I know that. I can do it, but the program's given me the ability to do those things that I can't do myself. They told me that God would do for me what I could not do for myself, and He has. He has. None of the things that they told me would promises that I was given have failed. They told me when I came in that Alcoholics Anonymous will, if you work the program to your best of your ability, and if you do the things that we tell you to do, you will be sober. You will realize the promises outlined in the book, and that your life will get better. And it has. until I think about it. I still don't have the Cadillac, but that wasn't part of the promises. They said, we don't deal with anything other than alcohol. They said, we will help you with your problem with booze. Then it's up to you to make sure that you still have a job and that you treat your wife and family right and that type of thing. This program was designed for me. It has given me all of these things, and there's just no way that I could ever give back to anybody, any individual or any, even AA itself, what's been given to me. As a group, Alcoholics Anonymous is the ultimate. I love it. I look at the steps, and I notice that the steps say we, and that it says we care, and because I'm totally, even today, as an individual, far short of where I would love to be. I'd like to be so caring and so acceptable and lovable, and sometimes I just can't be that way. But the group of Alcoholics Anonymous, all of us as alcoholics, helping each other, showing each other, sharing with each other, are the we. The we that care and the we that can go through the 12 steps. I just want to tell you that we're so grateful. I know I speak for Dorothy too when I say we're so grateful that you're here. We're so glad that you become part of our lives, and that you're part of our lives and we're part of yours. For an individual that didn't particularly care for people, it's difficult, but I know myself that I love the program. I love all of you, and I hope you'll just keep trudging the road to happy destiny with us. Thank you.